So before we get into it, I just wanted to take a second and point out Maya on drums, doing an amazing job at a very hard task. That is a very difficult thing to do, to pick up drums, especially with a band that's been playing for a while. We have these little intricacies and we don't follow the music, and she just does an amazing job, so thank you, Maya. She does, thank you. So let's get into it, because today, if you haven't noticed, is a weird Sunday. It's not a normal Sunday. Maybe you've been lost in the service, because I know I have, and I wrote it, so... So what's going on? What are we doing here? Well, there's two things going on today. In the beginning, we have this celebration. Jesus comes in for the festival, and it's a party. I mean, it is a party. And the city of Jerusalem is packed, and everything is wonderful. But we know that the end, which is what we're going to read after my sermon here, the end is the end. That's the crucifixion. And so there's this weird dichotomy between having fun and then all of a sudden what's going to end up. See, everybody is all coming to Jerusalem for the sacrifice. This is the Passover. This is the Exodus story, right, where the Israelites were in Egypt, and hey, let my people go, and the 10 plagues, and Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Eventually, the people are released from Egypt. And they get out. I mean, this is the world power, and they finally get out. And so to remember this event, they have this thing called the Passover. The Jews have this Passover every year where they take a goat and they slaughter it, and then they take the lamb's blood and they put it on their door, and it's a big event. It's a huge event because it is the thing that made these people free. And Jerusalem, is just swollen with people. There's nowhere to go. I imagine it looks a lot like Daytona this time of year with spring break, except maybe less tequila and more goat's blood. I don't know, maybe Daytona's got a lot of goat's blood. So Jesus comes into the town, and I don't know if you noticed, he comes in and says he's riding on a colt. I don't know why we still translate it this way. Colt is an old English word that means young donkey. Whenever we think colt today, we always think horse, but that's not what it was. He came in on a donkey. Now, this is the fulfillment of a prophecy. The Old Testament has these prophecies, right? And one of the prophecies is that the Messiah is going to enter in Jerusalem, and he's going to enter in on a donkey. That's how you're going to know that he's the Messiah, right? He's going to enter triumphantly. Now, some people thought that he shouldn't enter in on a donkey. He should be entering in on a chariot. That would have been more what they understood, right? Because a chariot would have been a device of war. And right at that moment, Israel was being oppressed by Rome. And so when he enters in, it's a big difference between what people were expecting and what they get. So I thought maybe, how can I figure this out? So a chariot would be like Jesus coming in on like a tank, right? Jesus enters in Jerusalem. All right, I mean, hey, here comes Jesus. He's on a tank. You better watch out. As opposed to say Jesus coming in on like a minivan. Nobody's afraid of anybody in a minivan. Except for maybe like a soccer mom who's late or something like that. Then get out of the way. But Jesus obviously isn't a soccer mom. He's just a guy, right? And he's fulfilling these prophecies. And the disciples are just crazy excited. They can't wait. They can't wait to see what's happened because they have seen so much already. They've seen food just multiply, like thousands of people being fed with almost nothing, and all of a sudden there's more food than they can handle. They've seen people, just hordes of people surrounding Jesus, so much that they have to escape to deserts at times. They've seen demons address Jesus and then be pulled out of people and expelled. They've seen people resurrected. They've heard God's voice. And few of the disciples even saw Moses and Elijah, prophets who had long left this world, show back up in front of them. These disciples have seen some crazy things, and they just can't wait to see what's going to happen next. And Judas, one of the disciples, he's seen enough. He knows what's going to happen next. He's going to take the reins. He's going to put the next into his own hands because he's fed up with it. When Jesus finally comes into Jerusalem, like this whole time Judas is following Jesus, this whole time Jesus is saying he's the Messiah, and Judas is with it, he's on board, and Jesus enters as some kind of mamsy-pamsy little bunny on a donkey. This isn't the Messiah. You can't overthrow the Romans on a donkey. I mean, the guy didn't even have a weapon, For crying out loud. Judas has had enough. This is the Messiah. This isn't the Messiah. You see, the Messiah is going to be the one that overthrows Rome. The Messiah is going to be the one that strikes while the iron is hot. And right now at the Passover, that's the perfect time to strike. Look, God already acted thousands of years ago when Israel was in Egypt. That's when God first sprung his people out of the world power at that time. So here they are again. The Israelites are in their own town, their own city. And the Romans, the world power at the time, has totally conquered them. So what better time than Passover? God did it once in Egypt. He can do it now again in Israel, in Jerusalem. And the town is so full of people. Okay, so the Romans have more weapons, and the Romans are better trained, and they have forts. But you know what? You throw enough of anything at something, and you'll overcome it. How many 5-year-olds do you think you can take? There's a number. 5-5-year-olds? There's a number. You can't take 1,000,000. Right? So where is it? This is Judas's philosophy. He's like, look, there are so many Jews in this town. And if the Messiah would just rise up, they would go nuts. They would overwhelm the Romans and nothing could stop them. And maybe the Romans have an advantage, but they have God. Isn't that what the Old Testament is all about? Every time God says, hey, do this, God says, no, I'm going to do it for my glory. Gideon had too many troops. They had to shrink the army so that God could control the victory. Here it is. Strike while the iron's hot. The Romans aren't even looking. Their pants are down. Get them. And what does Jesus do? Rides a donkey. Judas has had enough. Judas has seen enough. As if he needed more proof. When they go into town to have the Passover meal, they have to do it in secret. Did you catch that? The disciples said to Jesus, hey, how do we do this? We need to do this Passover meal. But we're not from Jerusalem. We don't have any of the things to do the meal. How do we do this? And Jesus says, okay, you're going to go into town. You're going to find a guy. He's going to be getting some water. He's going to carry it. You just follow him. You go into some back little place, and then you guys can meet up when nobody's watching. And it just gets Judas. It makes him so mad. Why? Why would you be so secretive? If you're the Messiah, you should be begging him, come at me, bro. Why would you be scared and hiding in the back if you're the Messiah? You say you're the Son of God, but you're acting more like some anemic fool who doesn't know what he's doing. You even lift, man? See, the problem here is Judas is a zealot. This is not just somebody who's like, got a lot of energy or something like that. A zealot is somebody who's part of the paramilitary of Israel. He's a military guy. He's a warrior. He found Jesus. When he looks at the other disciples, he sees a whole bunch of nimbly-bimbly little bunnies because all of the rest of them don't know what's going on. They were fishermen. They were tax collectors. Jesus had to go up to them and called them. Judas found Jesus. He was looking for the Messiah. He wanted to know who the Messiah was so that he could lend his sword to the cause. Judas was ready to give his life for him. In fact, we know that Judas was probably the best of the disciples because Judas held the purse. If you held the purse, that means that you're going to have conversations with Jesus about all the things you're going to do. Somebody comes up and they have money to donate. Okay, here, Judas, take this money. And then what are we going to do with this? All right, so Jesus says this, and Judas is talking, and the two of them are figuring out what they're going to do, and Judas is going to go off and do it. And what's he going to do? Hey, Peter, go here, Andrew, go here, and Levi, do this, and James, do that, and all this other stuff. Judas was the focal point of the ministry that was Jesus. This was the top guy. And because he was so zealous, because he was so at it, he wasn't scared of anybody. He begged the priest, come at me. He says, you think you got something? I got something. In the Garden of Gethsemane, it says that somebody pulls a sword. And another reading, it says that person is Peter. Where do you think Peter got the sword? He's a fisherman. He doesn't know people who make swords. It's not like today. You can't just go to Walmart or something and get a gun, right? You have to know somebody who can make you a sword. And then you have to put the money aside and get a sword. It's not like you just go and get a butter knife or something. That sword was probably put in his hands by Judas himself. Because Judas knew it was going to come to swords. It was going to be great. See, and that was the problem. Judas had an idea of how it was supposed to be. And he said to God, no, God, you can't do it any other way than this way. This is the way you're going to do it. And then when God did it his own way, Judas said, no, that's wrong. That can't be God. God doesn't work that way. He only works this way. And see, whenever you find yourself telling God what God can and cannot do, that's when you know you've taken a wrong exit. Time to turn around. At some point, this man who was willing to give his entire life to Jesus and his cause got off on the wrong exit. We don't know when it was, but we know how it was. We know that it was Satan whispering in his ear. And that should give us all a pause. This was the best disciple. And he got turned. If the man that would give his life for Jesus, who was looking for the Messiah, who knew the Bible better than any of the other disciples, if that man could be turned, what do the rest of us have? What does anybody have? Everybody is up for grabs. And that's a scary proposition to think, that there might be these forces that are pulling aside you and me and everybody else from Jesus. Now here's the thing. This is the thing. Because who cares about that dirty old scratch Satan? It doesn't matter. He still could have said everything he said. He still could have done everything to Judas. Judas still could have followed everything that he did. It still could have gone exactly the way it did. The problem was not that Judas did all of those things. The problem is what happened next, which is when Judas said, not even God can forgive this. See, that's the second time that he told God what God can do. See, the problem with Judas is it's all about Judas. He was the best disciple. He betrayed his Lord, our Lord, Jesus Christ. He could have been the best disciple still had he come to Jesus after the resurrection on hands and knees and begged forgiveness. How amazing would it have been if Judas did that? We would have seen, oh wow, who is this person, Jesus, that even his betrayer he could forgive. But Judas said, no, God is so small. God only works like this. God only works the way that I think he works. And so Judas did one last thing that Satan convinced him of doing, which was killing himself. Rather than finding everlasting life, he took his life. Interestingly enough, Jesus said exactly that. If you take your life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake and the sake of the gospel, you will find it. How often do we do that? Do we tell God, God, this is the thing. God, this is where I need my blessings. How often do we put our blinders on to all the other miracles that God is doing in our life, but all we can see is the thing that he's not doing? How often we say, God, I need you here. And God says, no, I've done this, and I've done this, and this, and this. Just turn around. Just stop going your direction and come my direction and receive the blessings that I have for you. But we say, no, it's this way. It's my way. It's only this way. Don't you understand God? Who are we listening to at that moment? God decided on today that he would do something different. In the Old Testament, and so often, God decides that he's going to raise up somebody and there's going to be a military coup and that Israel's people are going to be released by the might of a sword. But God said, you know what? Now is the time to show you what real power is. I'm going to send my son, the Messiah, and he's going to show the world really, really, truly what power is. You think you have power. God says to humans, no, you don't even know what power is. I'm going to show you what real power is. Let's listen to what real power looks like.